Another busy day as a personal chef in Beverly Hills. As you guys know, Fridays are busy because of all the food prep for the weekend on top of the lunch and dinner that I do. That's 6 meals worth of food smashed into 8 hours of prep, and that means I need my prep list. They wanted spaghetti and meatballs for their lunch today, but didn't want all those extra carbs, so we made it with spaghetti squash instead of pasta. I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of spaghetti squash, but maybe I just haven't been cooking them properly. Let me know if you know a better way. I cut the squash in half, scoop out all the seeds, hit them with olive oil, salt, put them face down on a sheet pan and forked a bunch of holes to help release steam as it cooks. For the meatballs, I make a panade with Wonder Bread because that's what I have on hand. Almond milk because they don't like milk, and let that sit. I use a lot of panade for my clients because they really like fluffier and softer meatballs and not super hearty meaty meatballs, if that makes sense. I use a combination of beef, veal, and pork, a ton of chiffonade basil and parsley, crushed garlic, small diced onions, a bunch of grated Parmesan cheese, fresh cracked pepper, the panade I made earlier, and eggs. Then I get in there, make sure it's thoroughly mixed but not overworked, and let that chill in the fridge for 30 minutes. For the sauce, I gently caramelize some finely diced onions in olive oil and salt. Then once nicely browned, I throw in crushed garlic to gently fry before I add in tomato paste. Over medium heat, I constantly move it around to caramelize and cook out the raw metallic flavor of tomato paste. Do not throw in tomato paste willy-nilly. And finally, the crushed tomatoes. Oh, and I add in lots of Italian seasoning and let that simmer as long as I can before it's lunchtime. I remembered I had saved some Parmesan rinds, so I throw that into the sauce as well. In a preheated pan, I add in some olive oil and throw in my meatballs and into the oven at high heat to get them golden brown. Using a fork, I just gently fork the spaghetti squash up and set that aside. It's crazy how it just shreds like this. Can't forget to flip the balls so that they brown evenly. Once those are nicely colored, I deglaze with a bit of water and scrape off all that good on the bottom of the pan and throw it into our sauce to finish cooking and infuse it with all that flavor. So much lunchtime, so I throw in a handful of fresh basil and let it simmer. I gave the sauce a taste and it was a bit acidic, so I hit it with a touch of baking soda to bring that acidity down. I can't wait to hear what the Italians have to say about this blasphemous bowl of spaghetti and meatballs. I toss the spaghetti squash with the marinara, some fresh parm before I plate with 3 meatballs and garlic rubbed bread. They loved it, so y'all can't tell me nothing. I've been asked by a lot of you guys what I eat when I'm working, and I am very excited to disappoint you guys. My lunch today was literally spam that I fried up in that sweet yuzu sesame soy and 6 scrambled eggs. I'm not joking, I kind of felt sick after this. It was just too much. Then I get back to work. Another busy day as a personal chef in Beverly Hills, part 2. After their lunch and my lunch, I jump on their weekend meal prep. For their first weekend meal, there were plenty of sauce and meatballs left over, so he asked me to cook some spaghetti for him to enjoy over the weekend. I rinsed them, tossed with a little bit of olive oil so that they wouldn't stick. I only do this when they're having it the next day. She wasn't planning on eating the spaghetti and meatballs, so she requested a frittata. I cleaned these cherry tomatoes from the farmer's market, tossed in olive oil, salt, and threw them into the oven at a low temp to bake. When that's done, in a glass container, I combined the roasted tomatoes, caramelized onions, goat cheese, fresh basil, eggs, and some sauteed zucchini and bake that at low temp. For their second weekend meal, I'm preparing them a niçoise salad, so I boiled the cutest baby potatoes from Melissa's Produce in salted water, thyme, and rosemary. Drain them and let them cool. Next are hard-boiled eggs. I've got a video on how to get perfect hard-boiled eggs, so check it out if you want, or don't. Proper niçoise also needs some crispy blanched green beans, so I cleaned these, blanched in salted water, and shocked them. Then I grabbed my large piece of salmon and divided it into 2 portions. She wants salmon salad in her niçoise, and he wants it grilled. The salmon salad is quite simple. I gently bake it covered in olive oil, combined with chopped celery, mayo, Dijon relish, lots of fresh dill, fresh lemon juice, and a bit of fresh parsley. The dressing for the niçoise is also simply lemon juice, Dijon, parsley, chives, honey, and olive oil. Super simple. To make it easy for them to eat, I have it all arranged in bowls with the lettuce, green beans, potatoes, tomatoes, cucumbers, hard-boiled eggs, grilled salmon for him, and salmon salad for her. Oh, and I almost forgot the olives. Their third weekend meal is going to be caramelized zucchini soup. It's just deeply caramelized onions, thinly shaved zucchini that is also deeply caramelized before I add in some crushed garlic to fry, picked thyme leaves, and chicken stock. Blend it up with a touch of butter until smooth and strained. I also sauteed some cubed zucchini that I peeled in a bit of olive oil and salt. He's been enjoying the zucchini pieces in his soup while she enjoys it smooth. Their fourth weekend meal is a Korean barbecue inspired wild mushroom bowl. I got these beautiful wild mushrooms, so I just cleaned them up before I tossed them with a kalbi marinade that I made for short ribs and threw them into the oven to cook and caramelize those sugars. I had to rush to finish in time because I wanted to go home, so I kind of stopped filming, but here's me plating it. We got brown rice, steamed bok choy, steamed broccoli that I dressed with the sweet yuzu soy, the kalbi marinated mushrooms, and toasted sesame seeds. And for their dinner tonight, they enjoyed their Asian chicken salad so much earlier this week, they requested it again. So I shaved some red cabbage and apple cabbage for her, these beautiful lettuces for him, obviously washing and spinning all of them, no bugs and dirt here. I gut and cubed these cucumbers, clean and slice sugar snap peas on a bias, slice cilantro, shred some roasted chicken breast, chop cashews, and julienne carrots. Finally, dinner time, so I make them their salads with 2 different bases, served with the ever lovely avocado roast, crispy wontons, and off they go. Then I do the dishes, clean up my mess, take out the trash, and head home. I'm tired. Are you tired? I hope you guys have a good weekend. This is a normal day as a personal chef in Beverly Hills. My client texted me at 9 a.m. and told me that they would be having chicken for lunch. So I hit up my chat room on Instagram and asked for some suggestions. And Frequencies on Film suggested chicken piccata, and I thought that was a great idea. So no one seems to know whether chicken piccata is an Italian dish or an Italian-American dish, but it's usually a breaded chicken cutlet with a lemony caper butter sauce. My clients don't really like anything breaded, so I am just going to make sure that the chicken skin is crispy enough to replace that breading. Started off by breaking down my chicken and removing all the bones. Since it's going to be served with a sauce, I just simply season it with my favorite kosher salt and let that sit while I prep the veg. First veg is sugar snap peas. As you know, you gotta remove the strings, and then I cut it on a bias. I'm just gonna give these guys a quick saute to keep their crisp texture, but also cook out some of that raw vegetal flavor and bring out the natural sugars. We got these cool assorted baby squash from the farmer's market, so I just cut them into little wedges that are around the same size. This is gonna help them cook evenly. Start them on medium heat in a bit of avocado oil and salt to get some nice color. I boiled these baby Dutch potatoes in salted water at the beginning, but I forgot to record like an idiot. But once they were done, I drained them, smashed them, hit them with some olive oil, and got them in the oven to get them as crispy as possible. I personally feel like chicken always has to be served with some kind of potato. Then I start cooking my chickens at a steady medium heat to get that skin nice and rendered and crispy as possible. While that's going, I finally mince shallots, pick the parsley leaves, and thinly slice them. I've always been told not to chop soft herbs. Just one solid run through with a sharp knife so that you don't bruise them. If you use a sharp knife and slice instead of crush, your herbs will also last a lot longer before they turn brown and turn to mush. This sliced parsley will stay nice and dry for at least a week. Once the chicken skins are nice and crispy, I pull them out and I'm going to throw those into the oven to gently finish cooking while I make the sauce. If you've never made chicken piccata, the sauce is super simple, easy, and it's absolutely delicious. In the same pan that I seared the chicken, I throw in the shallots and sweat those out in that flavorful chicken fat and pick up any fond that's in the pan. Then I saute some grated garlic, just enough to toast but not burn. Burnt garlic ruins everything. Then deglaze with some white wine and reduce until the alcohol is all cooked off. You'll know by the smell. Then I throw in some capers with some of that brine. I add in a bit of chicken stock, reduce, and start throwing in cubed butter while mixing to emulsify. If the pan is too hot, it will break, so be careful. Just throw in butter a little bit at a time until it's fully emulsified. When it's at the consistency I want, I throw in that fresh parsley and fresh lemon juice. I know some people throw in whole slices of lemon, but I find that adds a bit of bitterness that I'm not a big fan of. Give that a taste and see if it needs a bit more salt, and it's done. One tip for when you cut anything with a crispy skin, whether it's chicken, duck, or even fish, is to cut its skin side down. I know it sounds weird, but that way the skin won't slide around and it's gonna stay right on your protein. Into plate, I put that sliced crispy chicken thighs and breast in the center, surrounded with those nice sugar snap peas, baby zucchinis, some of those crispy potatoes, and that vibrant, briny, citrusy, herby, buttery piccata sauce. Piccata sauce all over the chicken and veg before it goes out. Hope they like it. Thanks for the suggestion, brother. Hi, I'm the clown that asked my clients if they would like gyoza for a light dinner without making sure my local grocery stores carried the wrappers. For those of you who might not know, gyozas are Japanese dumplings usually with a pork and cabbage filling. So what I thought would be a quick and easy dinner to make for my clients turned into me having to make my own wrappers. So I combined all-purpose flour, salt, and hot water and kneaded it until it started coming together. Pulled it onto my cutting board and just went to town on it for like 12 minutes. Then I split it up into two and wrapped it to let it rest and prevent it from drying out. And while that's resting, I jump on the filling. Strangely, Bristol Farms didn't have any Napa cabbage, but they did have Savoy cabbage, so I just grabbed that. Whenever I cut cabbage, I quarter them and cut out the tough core. Then I thinly slice them, throw them into a bowl, toss with salt, and let that sit to pull out all the water inside the cabbage. Here I am slicing some green onions. Not too shabby. I add a bunch of grated garlic and combine with finely minced ginger. Then I firmly squeeze out all the excess water from the cabbage. This part is very, very important. If you don't squeeze out all the water, you'll be left with a watery gyoza, and that's definitely not what you want. Then I combine with ground pork, the aromatics, sesame oil, a bit of white pepper, and I can't forget mushroom powder. The dough has rested for about 15 minutes, which should be plenty of time for the gluten to relax and finish hydrating. If you were to skip the resting phase, you would have an absolute terrible time trying to get them to roll out. I rolled them out to a log, cut out 8-gram portions, and then I got rolling. I used cornstarch to prevent them from sticking to each other and to the rolling pin. Then I lay out 9 at a time and put in a little bit more than half a tablespoon of filling into the center of each wrapper, rubbing water around the outside to help stick to itself and get pleating. I used to make hundreds of these at one of my jobs 15 years ago, but I really haven't done it since, so I gotta admit, I was pretty rusty. Here's a close-up of my pleating technique. It's not great, but it's not bad. It's better than I thought it would be. I made the rest of the gyoza, froze half for a future appetizer if we have guests. To cook them, I gently fried them on one side in a bit of avocado oil, flipped them over and added some water and covered to let it steam. As the water evaporates, the dumplings will be perfectly cooked and the remaining oil will fry the other side. It's like magic. Then I drained them on paper towels to remove the excess oil and plated them with the ginger yuzu sesame soy, a few florets of steamed broccoli for fiber and nutrients, and that was their light dinner. This time I'll tell you, they really loved it. Now, which country makes your favorite dumplings? This is how I make my paella as a personal chef in Beverly Hills. This one's gonna be a long one with a lot of info, so I hope you're ready. My clients are having guests tonight and they requested seafood paella. Few things I want to get out of the way. One of my clients cannot have fresh peppers, so I will not be using any bell peppers in this dish. First thing I want to do is get the sofrito going, so I chop up a few onions, throw it in a pot with enough olive oil to cover, salt, and a few sprigs of thyme and rosemary. Normally I would put peppers in at this point, but well, I already told you why I'm not. Then cook that down until it's at the point where it's about to start caramelizing. I like to add the tomato paste and garlic around this time because I cook the onion at a higher temperature at the beginning and don't want to risk burning the tomato paste or the garlic. I'm gonna mix that in and throw it into the oven at 250 degrees for 4 hours. Just let that gently cook and deeply caramelize without worrying about burning it. While that's going, I ran to Italy to get some seafood. I've actually never been here this early, so it was cool to see the fish case completely filled like this. It's beautiful. Then my boy over here set me up with all my clams, mussels, scallops, and shrimps. I wanted to get lobster as well, but they were looking pretty scrawny, so I passed. I had to go pick up some green bananas for my client, but as some of you guys know, I am colorblind and cannot tell what bananas are green or yellow. This has been my lifetime struggle. So I hunted down an employee to help me out. Thank you, sir. Then I headed back to my client's home and it's time for lunch. 1 yolk and 3 egg whites with a slice of toasted sourdough bread. I collect shrimp heads and shells whenever my clients request them just for these occasions. So I took them out of the freezer, laid them out on a sheet pan and get them roasting in the oven for stock. It's time to clean my seafood. First are the scallops. Most of you guys know this, but for those who don't, this is called the foot of the scallop. It's the adductor muscle that holds the shell together and it's pretty tough, so we're gonna remove it. Then I salt them, put them onto paper towels on both sides to soak up any excess moisture. For the shrimps, I'm gonna cure them with a mix of 3/4 salt and 1/4 sugar to season them and also to accentuate the sweetness of the shrimp. I'm gonna lay them on paper towels as well, right next to the scallops to pick up moisture. Now for some tedious work. I like to really clean my shellfish, especially mussels. They always have little barnacles and things on them, and I find the best way to get them clean is by using the tip of another mussel. Just scrape them until they're nice and pretty. See? Look how nasty that is. Always de-beard your mussels. It's easy. Just grab them and pull them. For clams, I usually like to let them soak in salted water overnight to purge them of any sand, but we don't have time for that today, so I just shake them up and give them a rough mix and change the water a few times until the water runs clear. Kind of like rice, but with clams. So this is where things deviate from how paella is traditionally made. My clients and I really like our seafood, like a whole lot of seafood, so this is what I do. In a large pot, I just saute some onions and garlic with a bit of salt, throw in 95% of my shellfish, saving a handful of each for the final cooking process, and throw in a bunch of white wine to steam them. I like to pull out the shellfish right as they pop open so that they're not overcooking. Overcooking shellfish is a crime. Now to get all that shellfish meat to fit into my paella, I remove all the meat from the shell. This is also when I go through each piece of steamed mussel meat and make sure there are no hidden beards. Nasty. Then to that white wine liquid with all that flavorful clam and mussel juice, I add back in the shells and the roasted shrimp shells, adding water and chicken stock. I'm gonna simmer this for an hour and this will be my paella stock. Maximum seafood flavor. And as you guys know, guess means caviar, so I do the usual buttered toast points, chopped hard-boiled eggs, and chives. I'm gonna make you look at my chives every time. I've got a bit of time before the guests arrive, so I made a quick churro batter with AP flour, salt, baking powder, avocado oil, and boiling hot water. Mix that up and throw it into a piping bag. And for the cinnamon sugar, it's just gonna have cinnamon and sugar. And you can't have paella without saffron. So I get my saffron, crush it a bit between my fingers, and let it sit in hot water to get all that color and flavor out. This is what my sofrito looked like after 4 hours. The smell is insane and it's so sweet from all that slow caramelization. All that's left to do is remove the stems of the herbs. Time to get the paella going, so I strain the stock twice to make sure there are no shards of shells or sand that might have been hiding in the clams. Guests will be here very soon, so I start searing my scallops and then the shrimps, only cooking them halfway so I can finish them later. Guests have arrived, so it's time to serve them their cocktails, which happen to be vodka tonics and their caviar platters. I'm sorry if you guys are getting bored of the caviar platters, but the guests love them. Now back to the paella, I add in the sofrito, get it nice and hot, and toss in the bomba rice. Make sure you use bomba rice or calaspara rice. Traditionally, these are the only rice that are used for paella because, well, they're from Spain and that's what they use, mainly because they're very good at absorbing lots of stock without getting mushy. Perfect for paella. I toast it in that sofrito oil and coat it with all that flavor. Then I throw in smoked paprika and let it bloom in the oil. My client may not be able to have fresh peppers, but he is okay with smoked paprika. I don't know, I don't make the rules, okay? Leave me alone. Now, before the paprika and the rice start to burn, I add a decent amount of white wine, reduce it, add all that saffron water, season with salt because no one likes a bland paella, and I start adding in our flavor-packed seafood stock. This is where it gets tricky. I just shake the pan to get the stock settled and flatten out the rice. You cannot, I repeat, cannot go in there and start moving around the rice, otherwise you'll end up with a mushy, starchy mess. Now I'm just gonna let this gently simmer until the rice is cooked, adding more stock as it gets absorbed until the rice is 90% cooked. As you can see, I had to use the grill because it's the only way I could heat up something this big. The heat is uneven, so I had to constantly baby it, turning it, moving it. Kinda sucks, but I gotta do what I gotta do. Now once the rice is 90% cooked, I add in the shellfish that I saved so that it can look nice and pretty. The rice is now basically done, so I throw in all those shucked clams and mussel meat, top with the shrimps and scallops, leaving it for a bit longer to crisp the bottom of the pan and finish heating up that shellfish. Then I take it inside and get ready to plate. I garnish garnish with chives, pile the seafood and rice high on the plates with a wedge of lemon, and off they go. And to pair with their paella, they're gonna have some farniente. As they eat their mains, I finish up their dessert. I pivoted last minute to making buñuelos instead of churros. I thought it would be cuter. I pipe them onto parchment papers, throw them face down into the oil and get them nice and crispy, then straight into the cinnamon sugar to coat. I served it with chocolate sauce, scoop of vanilla ice cream, sitting on top of that chocolate shortbread crumble from before, and off they go. Smash or pass?